Today we're updating my Legendary Commander investment tier list for free-to-play and low spenders to include the two new Legendary Commanders that recently landed in-game. That's Joan Prime and Jan, the Garrison Captain. So stick around in this video for the exact guidance you need on which Legendary Commanders are still worth your Universal Legendary Commander sculptures in fall of 2022. Hello my friends and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming, and the last time I released this tier list, it was extremely popular. In fact, for those of you visiting my channel for the very first time, I have the most viewed tier lists for Rise of Kingdoms, and my goal with this list is to help you understand which commanders are a good investment. If you put sculptures into the commander, are they going to be valuable to you for a very long time or not? This is designed to address the sorts of questions I get in my live stream, because I would always be shocked when people will be interested in commanders that I thought were relatively low priority. So this is the list as we made it in my previous video. And if you're looking for the explanation as to how I even landed in this exact spot, I'll remind you at the end of this video how you can go watch that previous version of the tier list for a more detailed explanation. Now keep in mind, this list is not yet updated to include the new Joan meta, so a number of commanders are going to jump around. The only thing that I've actually changed already since the last time you've seen this is the free section, including a bunch of gold key commanders where I do not think you should put a single Universal Legendary Commander sculpture in almost any circumstance. So just to remind you of what these categories are and how this is broken down, the top priority commanders are great investments. They will be great investments in the game for a very, very long time. You put sculptures in these commanders and they will be premium for at least half a year, maybe more like a year. Hard to say exactly with ranged commanders coming into the game, but that's a whole separate topic. The low priority commanders are the ones you should look to after you've locked up the top priority commanders. Those top priority commanders are, in my opinion, more important and likely to be longer lasting investments. The yellow tier below that is the before Season of Conquest only section. Yes, these are good commanders, and if you're going to put sculptures in them, you really want to have done that and finish those projects before you get to KVK Season 4 and beyond. Because once you get to KVK Season 4 and beyond, that's when this wide world of commander possibilities opens up to you, and you would much rather put sculptures into these new commanders rather than the ones you were getting before. So you want to have all of the before Season of Conquest projects locked up if you start them prior to getting into Season of Conquest. Then you've got your niche role category, which is to say, you could do these commanders if you're free to play or a low spender, but you better really know what you're doing, because these are not just like universally amazing commanders for free to play and low spenders like the ones in top priority are. And then just know is the category of commanders that you really shouldn't consider at all, and I can review why those are there. You could make an argument that Garrison Captains also belong in that category, but I left them in niche role so that it could be really clear that these commanders have a niche role and these are the ones you just shouldn't do. So let's start by dropping Joan Prime into the mix here. And I'm going to put her all the way up in the top priority category because she is extremely strong. And if you're looking for a detailed guide about Joan Prime, I'll remind you of that at the end of the video, but I'll also have a little card up in the top if you want to jump to that now. Joan Prime is really strong, but weirdly enough, even though she does a rage buff and a damage boost and does lots of raw damage, she's very powerful. When I poll my live streams and when I check in with people, 75% say that Nevsky is a higher priority than Joan Prime, which I found to be fairly surprising. So she is a top priority investment. However, I will argue that Skippy and Nevsky and Boudica Prime all are probably higher priority. And your goal, if you're just getting to Season of Conquest, that's KVK Season 4 and beyond, is to build out complete marches. So just because, for example, I think that Skippy Prime is all the way on the left over there, you may say, actually, I don't have any infantry marches, or I already have Alex Sun Tzu. I'm just going to use that. You might prioritize something else first. So, for example, if you've already invested in Nevsky and you've paired Nevsky with Mehmet, a combination I've recommended before. But you've got Esong with like no pairing. When you're deciding between Joan or Boudica Prime, I would argue you should go for the Boudica Prime. Give your Esong a really great pairing that's going to last you a long time. So all that to say, Joan Prime's power level is very high, but I actually have her at the very back of this list of the top priority commanders to invest in when you get to Season of Conquest. Now, if you already picked Joan Prime over Nevsky, you're not going to be disappointed in Joan Prime's performance. I'm just sharing with you the community sentiment around what they think is the better commander to do first. Now, from here, the low priority commanders are going to change a little bit, and this is sort of weird in a way that I wasn't expecting. The commander I'm going to bump up into low priority is actually going to be Artemisia. Now, I wasn't expecting to do that. I'm even going to move her over to the left over here. Why am I bringing Artemisia into this mix? The weird thing about Artemisia is that she just pairs extremely well with an expertise version of Boudica Prime. This is because Artemisia has a little self-silence effect, which is really bad, but she gives herself a huge damage boost in exchange for that. Well, Boudica Prime shrugs off the silence, and so it turns out that the Boudica Prime Artemisia pairing's really good. And if you had even a 5/5/1/1 Artemisia, that is going to do extremely well. In fact, in guides I've made ages ago talking about the best unmaxed commander pairings, Artemisia often made an appearance there because of how good she was. So weirdly enough, I think that my experience with Boudica Prime has shown me that Artemisia has some new legs here. Now, I think we'll get new archers in maybe like 4 months or so, so just keep that in mind. So I put it into low priority for Artemisia because I think that that Boudica Prime Artemisia pairing is really good. That said, if you're bringing one archer march, you've already got Boudica Prime, you've already got Esong paired together, then just stop. You're good. You don't need that. But if you were building out 2 archer marches, okay, and you're starting to mess around with different combinations, you could go for that Boudica Prime Artemisia combo, and I really feel like she's got a breath of fresh air to her longevity with the Boudica Prime pairing. In addition, now that we've got these new cavalry commanders, I would say that XY has gotten a breath of fresh air as well. This is because if you wanted to make 2 really top-tier cavalry pairs, XY is still in the mix. Those 4 cavalry commanders you're going to use in some combination if you're making 2 cavalry marches, at the best of the best level is going to include Nevsky, XY, Joan Prime, and William. And by the way, William is still a really solid low priority investment. I only say low priority because those 4 up top are, in my opinion, better. But the weirdness of Joan Prime recently coming into the game is now all these people are talking about how OP William was. And it's like, dude, he's been good this entire time, but people are just realizing how good his kit actually is. Honda Tadakatsu remains in that low priority list purely because of how versatile he is and his power level is relatively high. And Nebu is in this list purely because there isn't yet a better archer to swap him out for. I think we are probably 4 months away, however, from Nebu getting kicked out of the rotation. So I'll caution you around that Nebu investment if you're going to start to invest in that commander now, that probably 4 months down the line, we'll see a replacement for him with a commander that's as powerful as Boudica Prime and all those commanders in that top priority list. As a reminder, my goal with this list is to give you the commanders that will be a great investment for a long time, not just the things that are really, really hot right now. This is why, for example, some commanders in the Just Know category include CJ and Ramses. They're actually not bad commanders. If I had an expertise CJ on my main account, I'd be using it in the open field, but I don't think it's a great investment, and I'll talk more about those reasons in just a bit. Let's get to the before Season of Conquest only. I think this category is largely unchanged. These are projects you really want to have finished up before you get to KVK Season 4 and beyond. I think Alexander the Great is still extremely premium, as is Esong. Alex pairs really well with Skippy Prime. You've got Esong, who pairs really well with Boudica Prime. This works great. I think that Charles Martel is here purely because of his power level in early KVKs and because you could pair him with Skippy Prime. So I'm actually going to bump his priority down ever so slightly relative to some of these commanders because I think that you probably shouldn't put universals into him but I would understand if you did drop a few in there to have an easier time in earlier KVKs and to try to use them later on. Now, I am bumping up Saladin and Mehmed because these commanders I have used for a very, very long time in KVK Season 4 and beyond. So those are still really great investments. You could pair Nevsky with Mehmed and do extremely well. Saladin also works with Mehmed, Ethelfled. It works with Nevsky, with Joan Prime, with XY. Like, these are really great early game commander investments. Minamoto is actually still really great in Season of Conquest, but if you're going to spend the money on him, you may as well do that really, really early and enjoy him for the entire time before Season of Conquest, and then get value with him when you're in Season of Conquest. And Richard I, not in my opinion a great open field commander in KVK Season 4 and beyond, but he actually does have utility. His AoE debuff is extremely good. He's amazing in early KVKs. He will do extremely well, even unmaxed. So I think he deserves to be in that before Season of Conquest only list, but I need to warn you, he's at the bottom of that list. He's probably one of the worst commanders that you could invest in that still holds pretty dang decent value, but is not as good as all these other choices in the before Season of Conquest only section. Now, this brings us to the niche role section, and in my opinion, that's where our new garrison captain with the cavalry rotation, Jan, belongs. All these commanders at the back of the niche role section are garrison commanders, and you shouldn't be investing in them, in my opinion, if you're free to play or a low spender. And there may be some really small kingdoms where you can get away with, like, you need to garrison captain even though you're a low spender, and there's just, like, higher spenders aren't available that might have more crystal technology. I don't know what that situation might look like, but I suppose in that situation, if you knew what you were doing, you could pick Jan, for example, and you'd be okay, right? So they don't go in the just no category. However, let's just review how these roles of commanders have changed and why some of these commanders are here very briefly. Amanatori works really well if you're going to pair her with Artemisia in the open field or in a garrison. I think that Attila and Takeda are still a fine pairing, but compared to your other cavalry options, they're simply not as premium. Birdie over here is a good rally, and he's very tanky, but otherwise, in my opinion, just an okay open field commander. Henry is a solid open field commander, but is primarily designed for rallying. So if you're going to be rallying, like, okay, this is why he's in the niche role category. Chandragupta is extremely good for open field and swarming garrisons, but free-to-play low spend shouldn't be focused on swarming garrisons. If you're making lots of cavalry marches, however, you're going for 3 or more, then I think that Chandragupta would be a consideration. From there, Gilgamesh, really great rally for anti-Xeno technology. His heal punish is just really, really strong, and he's pretty decent in the open field. However, his health reduction is going to be duplicative with Skippy Prime, so I think he's fine. He's got a niche role, but I wouldn't pick him as a top priority. Pakal and Herald, same story. It's an okay rally, and it's used for cheeseburgering, but I really don't think you should aim to be a cheeseburger player. That's not a thing. That's where you're popping out of your city and doing damage and running back before they can really react to it. Cheeseburgering is a thing you do to get incremental value. It's not your first plan of attack. Now, I found Cyrus to be fine. There are people that use Cyrus and absolutely rave about him because he does lots of damage. I've just found him to be fine, but somewhat underwhelming personally, and certainly compared to all the other Archer Commander options you have right now, I would not prioritize Cyrus. This is if you were going for like a 4th Archer March at this point. If you're in this free-to-play, low-spend category, maybe you're looking at Cyrus. This comes from a lot of experience personally using him in the open field. Now, I will say there are people that rave about Cyrus. They think he's really amazing. I am probably not one of those players at this exact moment in time. Even though I do still plan to use him, I think for a free-to-play or low-spender, probably not your first pick for a commander investment. From there, Leonidas is still extremely strong with Guan Yu, but it's a niche role. He's good with Guan Yu, and that's all I've found for him is that role with Guan. Now, even at 5511, Leonidas with Guan is really, really, really good. However, weirdly enough, because people are focusing on so many other commanders to hit in the open field, the Guan-Alex combo, which I've always felt is just too vulnerable, too squishy, has a sort of breath of fresh air, a new life to it, because people just aren't focusing the Guans as much. So you can get away with Guan-Alex, and there are top-tier endgame players who will advocate that Guan-Alex is the correct Guan pairing to run. That said, I personally still subscribe to the Guan-Leo plan myself. Now, Takeda is really just here to pair with Attila. There are some cheeky things you can do with Saladin Takeda and Joan Takeda, but I just don't think it's all that great. I think it's a very, very niche role for a free-to-play low spender. Similarly, Tamaris is the sort of commander you could do. You might have gotten access to her before Season of Conquest, and she is really, really good if you bring at least 5 marches to the open field or you're swarming garrisons and you really know what you're doing. And this is going to be controversial, what I'm about to do. So I'm about to tell you that Trajan, although he's got a solid power level, and although we see a lot of people, even in Osiris League, when they have access to every commander in the game, but the Anniversary Grand Prix, they are still using Trajan. I think for free-to-play and low spenders, I'm personally going to bump him down right now to the just no category. Now, you may be like, whoa, Chisgule, what are you talking about? Remember, this is an investment tier list. And the thing is that his rage buff doesn't stack with new Joan's rage buff, by the way. Now, I still plan to use Trajan in the open field, but do I think that players who have not put any sculptures into Trajan should start that project under the plan of it being some niche project that they want to work on? I don't think so. So to summarize why I've bumped him down, it's because, first of all, if you're not bringing 5 marches to the open field, you personally aren't even really getting the full benefit. And second of all, it turns out that now you've got this Joan Prime buff that doesn't stack with the Trajan buff. So the damage boost she gives will stack, but the rage portion does not. Trajan's rage buff would overwrite Joan's rage buff. And the whole point of Joan is to have that skill going off a lot. So because of those reasons, and because he's even like fine less than expertise, but not as good as other options, I'm bumping him down. If you're already working on him, don't fret. Osiris League teams are still using him as a priority. But I think for your average free-to-play low spender, Trajan is probably not the commander you want to be looking at right now, especially because if you're going to use him as a primary, we don't know what the heck is going on with leadership commanders. They skipped the leadership commander cycle. So we may not get more leadership commanders, or who knows what's going on with them. What's the value of your leadership equipment? There's just way too much up in the air right now with leadership commanders. I got to bump him down. Now from there, CJ and Ramses, why are they here? Great commanders in the open field, don't get me wrong. But if you're picking commanders to invest in, focus the ones up top of this list, not over here. The reason CJ is problematic is he's just not versatile enough. He's not good in Canyon. He's not a good rally. He's not really used for swarming garrisons. Like, he's just fine. And Ramses is the same sort of story. There's a ton of commanders now that are better that have defense reductions. You've got XY, you've got Nevsky. So why are you going to run Ramses with a defense reduction that's just not as good? He's a good stat stick. If you had him expertise or you worked on him early on, he's still going to be great, either with Boudica Prime or with Esong, right? He's still a solid commander, or with Artemisia even, or with Nebu. But if you're deciding what to invest in now, I don't think it's Ramses. And the rest of these commanders, I mean, geez. Edward of Woodstock's a good rally in KVK Season 2 and 3, but that's where his utility starts and ends. Khan is the same story. His value drops off as a Cav commander really hard in Season of Conquest. And then Barca, Charlemagne, Lubu, Soliman, Moctezuma are all basically irrelevant. So to summarize, with the addition of Joan Prime to the game, she is a great commander to choose. However, I will argue that Nevsky is potentially the stronger cavalry commander and the better starting point, especially if you're not even bringing 3 marches to the open field yourself. You're not even going to get the full benefit of the Joan Prime anyways. So Skippy Prime, Nevsky Prime, Boudica Prime are right up there as the top priority, followed by the insane power level of Joan Prime. From there, great investments include Guan Yu for his AoE silence, William for his rage boost, his defense boost, his debuffs and instant proc damage, and Honda for having really, really great versatility and solid all-around power level. On the declining but still strong side, you'd invest in these commanders and I think they're fine. You include XY, Artemisia, and Nebu. Nebu being the one I am most concerned about for potentially getting replaced in a 4-month time frame with a stronger commander. From there, your before Season of Conquest section remains mostly the same, although I have bumped up Saladin's priority, given that there are now even more great cavalry commanders to go pair with, aka Joan Prime. The niche role section remains mostly the same, with Jan being added in, and I bumped Trajan down because there's just a lot of uncertainty around leadership equipment's value at this moment in time. He's the only commander in the game that you'd consider making a leadership set for, besides Ethelfled, who of course is still good. She's free. You get her, you use her. You're going to use her for a really long time, by the way. Note that people in the Osiris League Grand Prix with access to every one of these commanders was using Ethelfled in their 5 marches. So you probably should find a home for Ethelfled. And although Trajan Ethel is great on the field right now, if you're saying, hey, I haven't started on Trajan, should I right now? I would just pump the brakes on that, given the weirdness around leadership. This tier list is something that I plan to update every single time new commanders come into the game, and I'm going to be releasing a much more detailed tier list, as you've seen me do before, ranking every commander on every dimension of the game. So subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the much more detailed rankings for the very best rallies and garrisons and open fielding and canyon at an extremely detailed level. If you want to see the last time I did one of those lists, that'll appear right over here in the end credits. And if you want to see the videos I described earlier on, tap the little info button up top, or I'll have right over here the last time I released this list, talking more in depth about the role of each of these commanders that I didn't move around today.